The scream tore from her throat as rough hands shoved her hard, and suddenly there was nothing beneath her feet but air and the sickening lurch of gravity claiming her body. Catherine Matthews tumbled through the darkness, her traveling dress whipping violently around her legs as she hit the hard-packed earth beside the railroad tracks with brutal force. The impact drove the breath from her lungs, and pain exploded through her shoulder and ribs as she rolled down the embankment, stones and brush tearing at her skin. Above her, the train's whistle shrieked into the Nevada night, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails growing fainter as the locomotive carried on toward Carson City, taking with it the three strangers who had robbed her of everything she owned and nearly her life itself. Catherine lay motionless in the scrub brush, each breath a knife blade of agony in her chest. Stars wheeled overhead in the vast darkness of the frontier sky, so bright and numerous they seemed unreal. She tried to move to call out, but her voice emerged as barely a whisper. Blood trickled warm down her temple, and her left arm refused to obey her commands. The September night air carried a chill that made her shiver, shock settling into her bones alongside the cold. She had been traveling alone from San Francisco to meet her aunt in Virginia City, a respectable young woman of 22 years seeking a new start after her father's death had left her with nothing. Now she had even less than nothing, abandoned in the wilderness with injuries she could not assess and no help in sight. Time passed in a haze of pain and confusion. Catherine drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes certain she heard voices or footsteps, other times aware only of the ache in her body and the desperate thirst clawing at her throat. The moon rose higher, casting silver light across the sagebrush desert, and still she lay there, unable to summon the strength to rise. The sound of hoofbeats penetrated her delirium. Catherine forced her eyes open, squinting against the moonlight. A horse and rider materialized from the darkness, the animal moving at a steady walk along the tracks. The rider sat tall in the saddle, his silhouette unmistakably that of a cowboy, broad-shouldered beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Catherine tried to call out, but managed only a weak moan. The cowboy's head turned sharply in her direction. He reined in his horse immediately, swinging down from the saddle with practiced grace. His boots crunched on the gravel as he hurried toward her, dropping to one knee beside her broken form. "Good Lord," he breathed, his voice deep and textured with concern. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Catherine managed a small nod, her vision swimming as she tried to focus on his face. Even in the dim light, she could see strong features, a day's growth of beard and dark eyes that radiated both alarm and determination. "What happened to you?" He was already examining her injuries with gentle, careful hands, checking her head, her arm, her ribs with the confidence of someone who had dealt with trauma before. "Thrown," Catherine whispered. "From the train. They robbed me and threw me off." His jaw tightened, anger flashing across his features. "Bastards," he muttered, then seemed to catch himself. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, how long ago? I do not know. Hours, maybe. Can you move your legs?" When she managed to shift them slightly, he nodded. "That is good. Your left arm is likely broken, and you have got a nasty knock to the head. Some ribs too, I would wager. I need to get you to safety and tend these injuries proper." "I cannot ride," Catherine said, despair creeping into her voice. "You will not have to." Before she could protest, he was removing his long duster coat and spreading it on the ground beside her. With infinite care, he slid his arms beneath her body. "This is going to hurt something fierce, ma'am. I am truly sorry." Catherine bit back a scream as he lifted her. The movement sent fresh waves of agony through her battered frame, but his arms held her secure against his chest. He was strong, carrying her weight as though she were no burden at all. Through the haze of pain, she was aware of his warmth, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, the smell of leather and sage and wood smoke that clung to him. "My name is Catherine," she managed to say as he carried her toward his horse. "Catherine Matthews, James," he replied. "James Cordell." Hold on tight now, Miss Matthews. We have got a ways to go, but I will get you somewhere safe. Getting Catherine onto the horse required careful maneuvering. James mounted first, then reached down as his horse stood rock steady. With strength tempered by surprising gentleness, he lifted her up to sit sideways across his lap, cradling her against him. She bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, fighting to stay conscious through the pain. "There now," James murmured, settling her more comfortably and wrapping one arm firmly around her waist to hold her secure. "Just rest against me. My place is about 5 miles north. Nothing fancy, but it is warm and dry, and I have got supplies to patch you up proper." "I cannot impose," Catherine protested weakly. "You are not imposing. You are injured and alone in the middle of nowhere. Any decent man would do the same." He urged his horse into a gentle walk, keeping the gait smooth to minimize jostling. "Besides, nearest town is Reno, and that is a good 15 miles southwest. You would never make it in your condition." Catherine had no strength to argue. She let her head rest against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of the horse's movement beneath them and the solid strength of James's body supporting her. His arm around her waist was protective, keeping her safe, and despite the pain radiating through her body, she felt the first stirrings of relief. Someone had found her. Someone was helping her. She was not going to die alone in the desert after all. "Those men on the train," James said after a while, his voice low and measured. "Did you know them?" "No, they seemed like ordinary passengers at first. We were in the same car. Then after dark, when most people were sleeping, they surrounded me. One of them held a knife while the others went through my bags. They took everything. My money, my mother's jewelry, even my spare clothing. When I tried to scream, one of them hit me. Then they dragged me to the platform between cars and just pushed me off." James's arm tightened around her and she felt the tension in his body. 3 men attacking a lone woman. They are cowards of the worst sort. Did you get a good look at them? One was tall with a scar through his eyebrow. Another was shorter, heavy-set, with red hair. The third had a mustache and kept laughing. Catherine shuddered at the memory of that laughter as she fell. "I will remember that," James said grimly. "Might be I will hear of them causing trouble elsewhere. Men like that rarely stop with one crime." They rode in silence for a while, the desert stretching vast and empty around them. Catherine drifted, the pain making it hard to focus, but James's presence kept her anchored. Once when she stirred restlessly, he spoke soft words of comfort. "Easy now, Miss Matthews, we are almost there. You are doing just fine." Finally, lights appeared in the distance. As they drew closer, Catherine could make out a small ranch, nothing elaborate but well-maintained. A house built of timber and stone sat beside a barn, with corrals fanning out to one side. A few horses moved in the nearest pen, lifting their heads to watch as James rode in. "Not much to look at, but it is home," James said, guiding his horse right up to the porch. "Been working this land for 3 years now. Got about 24 horses, selling them to ranchers and the cavalry both." He dismounted with care, then lifted Catherine down with the same gentleness he had shown throughout the journey. She whimpered despite herself as the movement jarred her injuries, and James murmured another apology. He carried her up the steps and shouldered open the door, bringing her into a single large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space all together. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and doorways led to what she assumed were sleeping quarters. James carried her to a bedroom and laid her carefully on the bed, striking a match to light the oil lamp on the bedside table. In the warm glow, Catherine got her first clear look at him. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of good whiskey. His face was weathered from outdoor work but handsome, with a straight nose and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily, though now it was set in lines of concentration. "I need to examine your injuries proper now," James said, his tone professional but gentle. "I will be as respectful as possible, but I have got to see what we are dealing with here." Catherine nodded, too exhausted and hurt to protest. James worked with efficient care, checking her head wound first, cleaning away the blood with water from a basin. His hands were calloused but gentle, and he kept up a steady stream of quiet explanation as he worked. Cut on your temple, but not too deep. Head wounds bleed something fierce, but this one should heal clean. Your arm, though, that is broken for certain. I have set bones before, on horses and men both, but I will not lie to you, Miss Matthews. This is going to hurt worse than anything yet. I understand, Catherine whispered, bracing herself. James found splints and bandages, laying them out with practiced efficiency. He gave her a folded leather strap to bite down on, then positioned himself carefully. On 3, 1, 2, 3, the pain was blinding. Catherine screamed around the leather, her vision going white, but James worked quickly, setting the bone and splinting it before she could fully process what was happening. When it was done, he supported her as she gasped and sobbed, one hand gentle on her good shoulder. The worst is over, he assured her. You did well, Miss Matthews, very brave. He checked her ribs next, determining that at least 2 were cracked but not fully broken. He wrapped them carefully, his touch impersonal and respectful despite the intimacy of the task. Throughout it all, he maintained a steady commentary, distracting her with talk of his horses and the ranch. Finally, he stepped back, surveying his work. You will heal given time and rest, but you are going to need both in good measure. Those ribs alone will take weeks to mend proper and the arm longer still. I cannot stay here for weeks, Catherine protested. I was meant to meet my aunt in Virginia City. She will be worried sick when I do not arrive. Is there a way to send her word? I do not even know her address. She was going to meet me at the station. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. I have no money now, no belongings, nothing. Those men took everything. James pulled a chair close to the bedside and sat down, his expression thoughtful. Then here is what we will do. You will stay here and heal as long as it takes. I will ride into Reno tomorrow and see about getting word to Virginia City, post some notices about your aunt looking for you. Maybe she will do the same, trying to find you when you do not show up. Meanwhile, you are safe here. I give you my word as a gentleman that you will be treated with nothing but respect under my roof. Catherine studied his face, seeing only sincerity there. Why would you do this for a stranger? Because it is the right thing to do, James said simply. Because you need help and I am able to give it, and because I have been in tight spots before and had folks help me out of them. We are supposed to look after each other out here, Miss Matthews. The frontier is hard enough without turning our backs on folks in need. The tears Catherine had been holding back finally spilled over. James looked alarmed, pulling a clean handkerchief from his pocket and pressing it gently into her good hand. Did I hurt you? What is wrong? Nothing is wrong, Catherine managed through her tears. I just thought I was going to die out there, and then you found me and you have been so kind, I do not know how I will ever repay you. No repayment needed, James said firmly. Now you need rest more than anything. I will bring you some water and broth if you think you can manage it, then let you sleep. I will be right in the other room if you need anything. He was as good as his word, returning with water that Catherine drank gratefully and warm broth that eased the hollow ache in her stomach. He banked the fire in the bedroom fireplace, ensuring she would stay warm through the night, and left the lamp burning low. At the door, he paused. Try not to worry, Miss Matthews. Things will look better come morning. They always do. Despite everything, Catherine found herself believing him. She drifted into exhausted sleep, the pain in her body dulled by sheer weariness and the comfort of knowing she was safe. Morning came with sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. Catherine woke slowly, disoriented at first, then wincing as the movement reminded her of every injury. She managed to sit up carefully, finding that, while everything hurt, it was a manageable hurt rather than the overwhelming agony of the night before. James appeared in the doorway, balancing a tray. You are awake. Good, brought you some breakfast. How are you feeling? Sore, Catherine admitted, but better than I might have expected. He set the tray on her lap, and she saw he had prepared eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee. Her stomach growled, and James smiled. That is a good sign. Appetite means you are on the mend. As Catherine ate, James sat in the chair he had occupied the previous night. In the daylight, she could see the room more clearly. It was simple but clean, with a handmade quilt on the bed and curtains at the window. Everything spoke of a man who took pride in his home even if he lived alone. "I will ride to Reno this morning," James said. "Get word out about your aunt, and I need to report what happened to you to the law." Those men should not get away with what they did. Will the law even care? Catherine asked bitterly. About one woman robbed and thrown from a train, they should, James said firmly. And if they do not, I care. Nobody should be able to do what they did and just disappear without consequence. After breakfast, James helped Catherine to the main room, supporting her carefully as she walked on shaky legs. He settled her in a comfortable chair near the fireplace, providing pillows to cushion her ribs and positioning her arm to minimize strain. He brought her books from a small shelf and a quilt to keep her warm. "I will be back before dark," he promised. "There is food in the kitchen if you get hungry and water in the pitcher. Do not try to do too much, just rest." Catherine watched through the window as he rode away, his horse moving at a ground-eating lope. The ranch felt very empty with him gone, but also peaceful. She dozed on and off through the morning, waking to watch the horses in the corral and the vast stretch of desert beyond. True to his word, James returned before sunset. He came in looking frustrated, shaking dust from his hat. The sheriff was less than helpful, he reported, his tone disgusted. Said there is not much to go on, and tracking 3 men who could be anywhere between here and California is near impossible. He will keep an eye out, but I would not hold my breath waiting for justice from that quarter. "I expected as much," Catherine said quietly. "I did get notices posted about your aunt, though, and I sent a telegram to the Virginia City Marshal's office explaining the situation. If your aunt reports you missing, they will know to send word here." James hung up his hat and moved to the kitchen. "I also bought some things you will need. Clothes, personal items. I hope I guessed the sizes right." Catherine felt tears threaten again. "You did not have to do that. You cannot spend the next few weeks in a torn traveling dress," James said practically. "And before you worry about the cost, it was not much and I am doing fine. The horse business has been good this year." Over the next few days, a routine developed. James tended his horses and ranch work during the day while Catherine rested and slowly regained her strength. He was an excellent cook, she discovered, preparing simple but satisfying meals. In the evenings, they would sit together, and he would read aloud if her head was aching too badly for her to focus, or they would talk. Catherine learned that James had come west from Missouri 5 years earlier, looking for a fresh start after his parents died of fever. He had worked on various ranches, learning the horse trade, before saving enough to buy this land and start his own operation. He spoke of his work with quiet passion, describing the satisfaction of training a difficult horse or the pride of breeding strong, healthy stock. For her part, Catherine told him about growing up in San Francisco, her father's work as a banker, and her mother's death when Catherine was 16. She described the cultured life she had known, the parties and society events, and then the sudden crash of her father's bank that had left them ruined. Her father's death from a heart attack 6 months ago had left her truly alone until her aunt had written, offering her a home in Virginia City. "Sounds like you have been through a lot of loss," James observed one evening as they sat by the fire. "No more than many people," Catherine said. "The frontier is full of stories of loss and starting over." "That is true enough, but it does not make your losses any less real." James poked at the fire, sending sparks swirling up the chimney. "You are stronger than you know, Miss Matthews. Not many women could survive what you went through on that train and still be looking forward instead of back." "I do not feel very strong," Catherine admitted. "I feel frightened and uncertain. Before, I at least had a plan, a destination. Now I do not even know if my aunt is looking for me or if she thinks I simply changed my mind about coming. The telegram will reach her, James assured her. Give it time. As the days passed and turned into weeks, Catherine's injuries slowly healed. The headaches faded, her ribs stopped screaming with every breath, and though her arm remained splinted, the constant ache diminished to a dull throb. She began to help around the house as she was able, insisting on taking over some of the cooking and cleaning with one hand. James protested that she should rest, but she argued that she needed to feel useful. "I cannot just sit idle day after day," she told him firmly. "It will drive me mad." "Let me help." James relented, though he watched her carefully to ensure she did not overdo it. Catherine found satisfaction in the simple tasks, in preparing a meal or sweeping the floor. More than that, she found herself watching James, noticing things about him. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. The patience he showed with his horses, never harsh, always firm but kind. The way he would come in from a hard day's work and still ask how she was feeling, genuine concern in his voice. One afternoon, Catherine was peeling potatoes one-handed at the kitchen table when James came in from the corral, leading a horse with a pronounced limp. He looked worried as he secured the animal and began examining its leg. "What happened?" Catherine asked, setting aside her work. "Buck here stepped wrong, and now he is favoring his left foreleg. Could be a stone bruise, could be a strained tendon." James ran his hands down the horse's leg with gentle expertise. "Either way, he needs rest and careful tending." Catherine watched as James worked, his complete focus on the injured animal. He spoke softly to the horse, soothing words that seemed to calm the creature. After a thorough examination, he led Buck to a separate stall with deep bedding and brought cold water to soak the affected leg. "Will he be all right?" Catherine asked. "Should be with time and care, just like someone else I know." James smiled at her, and Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. That evening, as they sat together after supper, Catherine found herself studying James's face in the firelight. He was reading, his brow furrowed in concentration, and she felt a surge of affection so strong it startled her. When had this man become so important to her? When had his presence become the center of her day, his smile the thing she most looked forward to seeing? James looked up and caught her staring. "Something wrong?" "No," Catherine said quickly, feeling her cheeks warm. "I was just thinking how kind you have been to me." Most men would not have taken in a stranger and cared for her so selflessly. "I am not most men," James said, his tone light but his eyes serious. "And you are not just any stranger, Miss Matthews, not anymore." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Catherine could not quite name. Then James cleared his throat and returned to his book, and the spell was broken, but the feeling lingered. A few days later, a rider appeared on the horizon, approaching at a gallop. James went out to meet him, and Catherine watched anxiously from the window. The rider was a young man, barely more than a boy, wearing a deputy's badge. He handed James an envelope, exchanged a few words, then rode off again. James came back inside holding the envelope, his expression unreadable. "It is from Virginia City, from your aunt." Catherine took the letter with trembling fingers and broke the seal. As she read, relief and confusion warred within her. "She received word that I was missing and has been frantic with worry. She says she is making arrangements to come fetch me as soon as possible, probably within the next week or two." "That is good news," James said, but his voice sounded strange, almost hollow. "Yes," Catherine agreed, but as she folded the letter, she felt an unexpected pang of sadness. Of course her aunt coming was good news. It meant she could finally continue to her destination, start the new life she had planned. So why did the thought of leaving this ranch, leaving James, make her chest ache? That night, the atmosphere between them was strained. They both made conversation, but it felt forced, as though they were dancing around something neither wanted to acknowledge. When Catherine retired to bed, she lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and trying to untangle her feelings. She cared for James. More than cared for him, if she was honest with herself. Somewhere between being carried to safety in his arms and these quiet weeks of recovery, she had fallen in love with him. With his steady kindness, his gentle strength, his easy humor and deep integrity. The thought of leaving him filled her with a grief she had not expected, but what choice did she have? She could not simply stay here indefinitely, imposing on his hospitality. He had his own life, his ranch to run. And she had no reason to think he felt anything for her beyond compassion for someone he had helped. Yes, there had been moments, looks that lingered a heartbeat too long, accidental touches that sent sparks through her. But that could just be her imagination, her own feelings coloring her perception. The next morning, Catherine found James already up, working with one of his horses in the corral. She watched him from the porch, admiring the easy confidence with which he moved, the patient way he worked with the animal. When he saw her, he waved, but did not come over immediately, continuing his training session. Catherine went back inside and began preparing breakfast, moving carefully to protect her still-healing ribs. She was setting plates on the table when James came in, brushing dust from his shirt. "Smells good," he said, but his smile did not quite reach his eyes. They ate in awkward silence until Catherine could not stand it anymore. "James, have I done something to upset you?" He looked startled. "What? No, of course not. You have been different since the letter came yesterday, distant." James set down his fork and rubbed his hand over his face. "I am sorry, you are right. I have been acting strange." He met her eyes and she saw conflict there and something deeper. "The truth is, I have been thinking about you leaving and I realized something. I do not want you to go." Catherine's heart began to pound. "You do not." "No." James pushed back from the table and stood, pacing to the window. "I know I have got no right to say it. You have got your own life, your own plans. Your aunt is waiting for you. But these weeks with you here, Catherine, they have been the happiest I have known in years. Having you to talk to in the evenings, seeing you in the kitchen when I come in from work, watching you get stronger every day, I have gotten used to it. More than used to it, I have come to need it." Catherine stood slowly, her legs feeling weak. "James, what are you saying?" He turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his eyes took her breath away. "I am saying that I have fallen in love with you. I know it is too soon. I know you probably think I am crazy, but I cannot help how I feel. You are smart and brave and kind, and when I think about you leaving, it feels like someone is tearing my heart out of my chest." Catherine crossed the room to him, her own heart racing. "You are not crazy, or if you are, then so am I, because I love you too, James. I have been lying awake at night trying to figure out when it happened, but I think maybe it was from the very beginning when you found me and carried me to safety. You saved my life, but more than that, you gave me a reason to want to be saved." James reached out with one hand, gently cupping her cheek. "You mean that? You really love me?" "With all my heart," Catherine whispered. He bent his head slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope. Catherine's good arm came up to wrap around his neck, and James pulled her carefully closer, mindful of her injuries but unable to keep from holding her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and James rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Catherine. Stay here with me. Build a life together. I know I cannot offer you the kind of society life you grew up with, but I can promise you a home full of love and respect. I will work hard every day to make you happy, to give you the life you deserve." "Yes," Catherine said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, James, I will marry you. I do not want society life. I want this, exactly this. I want you and this ranch and a future we build together." James kissed her again, deeper this time, and Catherine felt as though her heart might burst with joy. When they finally pulled apart, he was grinning like a fool, and she imagined she looked much the same. "We should write to your aunt," James said practically, though his arms remained around Catherine. "Let her know you are safe and that you will not be coming to Virginia City after all." At least not to stay. We could visit her, Catherine suggested. Once I am fully healed, I would like her to meet you. I would like that too. James brushed a strand of hair back from her face with infinite tenderness. I want to do this right, Catherine. Proper courtship, proper wedding, everything as it should be. We have already been living under the same roof for weeks, Catherine pointed out with amusement. Under circumstances of necessity and with perfect propriety, James countered. Now things are different. Now we are courting with the intention of marriage. I should probably move to the barn or something to preserve your reputation. Catherine laughed. That is ridiculous. Who is here to judge us? The horses? I am here to judge, James said seriously. I want to be able to look you in the eye on our wedding day and know I treated you with nothing but honor and respect. That matters to me, Catherine. His sincerity touched her deeply. All right. If it matters to you, then it matters to me, though I draw the line at you sleeping in the barn. You can take the bedroom, and I will sleep out here by the fire. Absolutely not. You are still healing. They compromised with James taking the main room and Catherine keeping the bedroom, though both knew it was somewhat silly given everything they had already been through. But there was something sweet about it too, about James's determination to court her properly. Over the next few weeks, Catherine's injuries continued to heal, and James courted her with old-fashioned dedication. He brought her wildflowers from the desert, taught her to ride the gentlest of his horses, and spent every evening talking with her by the fire. They learned each other's habits and dreams, discovering a compatibility that went beyond their initial attraction. Catherine wrote to her aunt, explaining everything that had happened and her plans to marry James. The response came back full of relief that Catherine was alive and well, and happiness about her engagement, along with an invitation to visit Virginia City whenever they could manage it. James rode to Reno and returned with a simple gold ring, nothing fancy but perfect in Catherine's eyes. He proposed formally one evening under the vast Nevada sky, going down on one knee and asking her again to be his wife, and Catherine said yes again with tears of joy streaming down her face. They were married in Reno 6 weeks after Catherine had been thrown from the train, in a simple ceremony at the small church with the minister's wife and a few of James's friends as witnesses. Catherine wore a simple white dress that James had helped her pick out, and she had never felt more beautiful than when she saw the look in his eyes as she walked down the aisle. The wedding night was tender and sweet, James treating Catherine with loving care, mindful of her still healing arm but unable to hide his passion. Catherine gave herself to him completely, finding joy and pleasure in their union, and when they finally fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, she felt complete in a way she never had before. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Catherine threw herself into learning everything about horses and ranching, proving to have a natural aptitude for it. James taught her to train the younger horses, to recognize signs of illness or injury, to keep the ranch accounts. She discovered she loved the work, loved the satisfaction of seeing a frightened colt become a confident mount, loved the physical challenge of the outdoor labor. They worked side by side during the days and fell into bed exhausted each night, but it was a good exhaustion, born of meaningful work. The ranch prospered under their joint efforts. James's reputation for quality horses grew, and buyers came from farther and farther away. In their second year of marriage, Catherine discovered she was expecting a child. James was overjoyed, immediately becoming protective and worried, though Catherine laughed at his concerns. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, she reminded him. I will be fine. That does not mean I will not worry, James countered, but his hand was gentle as it rested on her still flat stomach, wonder in his eyes. Their son was born in early spring, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. They named him Daniel, and James proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with the baby at night and changing diapers without complaint. Catherine would watch him with their son and fall in love with him all over again, seeing the tender care he took with their child. Daniel was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Sarah, and then 3 years after that by another son, Michael. The house that had seemed so empty when Catherine first arrived now rang with children's laughter and the chaos of family life. James expanded the house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, and Catherine turned a small plot near the house into a vegetable garden. They made the trip to Virginia City when Daniel was a year old, finally meeting Catherine's Aunt Eleanor. The older woman embraced Catherine with tears, grateful to see her niece so happy and healthy, and she took to James immediately, recognizing the good man he was. Aunt Eleanor became a regular visitor to the ranch, doting on her great-nieces and nephews and helping Catherine during the busy times. Years passed in a blur of hard work, laughter, tears, and love. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most respected horse operations in Nevada. James took on a few hired hands as the work grew, and Catherine found she had a talent for managing the business side of things, keeping careful records and negotiating fair prices with buyers. Their children grew strong and capable, learning to ride almost before they could walk and taking on ranch chores as soon as they were able. James was a patient teacher with them, as he was with his horses, and Catherine instilled in them the importance of education, teaching them herself until they were old enough to attend the school that had been built in Reno. On their 10th wedding anniversary, James surprised Catherine with a proper trip, taking her to San Francisco for a week. It was the first time she had been back since leaving, and she was struck by how much the city had changed, and how much she had changed too. The society life that had once been her whole world now seemed foreign and artificial. She enjoyed the week, the fine restaurants and theater, but she was genuinely glad when it was time to return home to the ranch and their children. Have any regrets? James asked on the train ride back, the Nevada desert rolling past outside the window. About the life you left behind, Catherine took his hand, threading her fingers through his. None whatsoever. That life was not truly mine anyway. It was built on appearances and expectations. This life, our life, that is real, that is mine. James raised her hand to his lips. I fall in love with you more every day, Catherine Cordell. You know that? I do know, because I feel the same way about you. More years passed. Daniel grew into a fine young man, responsible and hardworking, with a gift for training horses that exceeded even his father's. Sarah proved to have her mother's head for business and her father's way with animals, a formidable combination. Michael was the wild one, always getting into scrapes but with a heart of gold beneath his mischief. James's hair began to gray at the temples, and lines etched themselves around Catherine's eyes, but to each other, they were as beautiful as the day they married. They still found time to sit together in the evenings, talking about their day and making plans for the future. The passion between them never faded, and Catherine still felt her heart skip when James smiled at her in a certain way. On the 20th anniversary of the night James had found Catherine beside the train tracks, they rode out together to the spot where it had happened. A small memorial stone had been placed there years before, not to mark a death, but to commemorate a beginning. They stood together, James's arm around Catherine's waist, looking at the stone and remembering. Hard to believe it has been 20 years, Catherine mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. 20 years since the best night of my life, James said. Catherine looked at him in surprise. The best night. I was broken and bleeding. You had to set my arm and patch me up. But I found you, James said simply, and finding you changed everything. That was the night my real life began, even if I did not know it yet. Catherine leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. If someone had told me that night, as I lay in the dirt certain I was going to die, that I would end up here, with you, with our family and this life, I would never have believed them. I would have thought it was too good to be true. But it is true, James said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. We made it true together. They stood there a while longer as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Finally, they mounted their horses and rode back toward home, where lights glowed warm in the windows and their family waited. As they crested the final rise and the ranch came into full view, Catherine felt a wave of contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. This was home. This was love. This was the life that had risen from the ashes of that terrible night so long ago, and she would not change a single thing about it. Years continued to pass in the gentle rhythm of ranch life. Daniel married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, a capable young woman named Emma who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the northern edge of James and Catherine's land, starting their own horse operation while still working closely with the family ranch. Within 2 years, they had made James and Catherine grandparents with the birth of twin boys. Sarah, independent and strong-willed, announced at 21 that she had no intention of marrying anytime soon. She was far too busy expanding the ranch's business into neighboring territories. Catherine supported her daughter's ambitions, recognizing her own spirit in the young woman. James, predictably, worried, but Sarah handled him with the same patient skill she used on difficult horses, and eventually he accepted that his daughter would make her own path. Michael, after several years of restless wandering working on various ranches throughout Nevada and California, finally settled down at 23 with the daughter of the Reno schoolteacher. He brought her home to meet his parents, and Catherine knew immediately from the way her son looked at his intended that he had found his match. They married in a ceremony at the ranch, with half of Reno in attendance, and moved into a newly built house on the southern edge of the property. The ranch that James had started alone had become a family enterprise, spreading across hundreds of acres with multiple houses and 3 generations working together. James, now in his 50s with more gray than brown in his hair, began to step back from the hardest physical work, though he still spent every day with the horses he loved. Catherine, her dark hair streaked with silver, managed the business with Sarah's help, and they had built it into one of the most successful operations in the state. On quiet evenings, after the grandchildren had been collected by their parents and the hired hands had gone to their quarters, James and Catherine would sit together on the porch swing James had built years before. They would rock gently, watching the sun set over land they had built a life on, and talk about everything and nothing. "Tired?" James would ask, and Catherine would shake her head. "Content," she would correct. "There is a difference." One evening in late summer, as they sat watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness, Catherine spoke thoughtfully. "Do you ever wonder how different our lives might have been if that train robbery had never happened, if I had arrived safely in Virginia City as planned?" James considered the question seriously. "I suppose I would still be here, running my horses, living alone, and you would be with your aunt, probably married to some respectable mine supervisor or merchant. We would never have met." "That is a terrible thought," Catherine said with a shudder. "It is," James agreed. "But it did not happen that way. Those men who threw you from that train, they thought they were destroying you. Instead, they gave you to me. Gave us to each other. I cannot wish they had been better men, but I can be grateful for where their cruelty led." "That is a very philosophical way of looking at it," Catherine said with amusement. "I am a very philosophical man," James replied with mock seriousness, then grinned. "Sometimes." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the swing and the distant whinny of a horse in the corral. Finally, James spoke again. "I have been thinking we should take another trip, maybe back east this time. I would like to see Missouri again, show you where I grew up." "I would like that," Catherine said warmly. "When were you thinking?" "Next spring, maybe, after foaling season but before the real heat of summer. Daniel and Michael can manage things here for a few weeks." "Then we will do it," Catherine decided. "Our children are grown, the ranch is thriving. We have earned the chance to travel a bit, see the world together." They made the trip the following May, traveling by train to Missouri. Catherine found herself nervous the first time she boarded a train since that fateful night 24 years before, but James held her hand, and the anxiety passed. They spent 3 weeks exploring the countryside where James had grown up, visiting his parents' graves, and seeing the small farm where he had learned his love of horses. From there, they traveled east to Chicago and then to New York City, marveling at the bustle and growth of the great metropolis. They saw plays and museums, ate in fine restaurants, and walked for hours through parks and streets. It was exciting and fascinating, but both of them felt a deep relief when they finally boarded the train back west. "Too many people," James observed as the train carried them away from the city. "Too much noise and hurry. Give me the desert and the horses any day." "I was thinking the same thing," Catherine agreed. "It was wonderful to see, but I am ready to be home." When they arrived back at the ranch, they were greeted by their children and grandchildren, and as Catherine looked around at all the faces of the family they had built, tears pricked her eyes. This was her legacy. Not money or social position, but love and family and land worked with care and dedication. Sarah surprised them a year later by announcing her engagement to a horse breeder from California, a quiet, thoughtful man who clearly adored her and respected her independence. The wedding was a grand affair, with guests coming from all over the West, and Catherine cried happy tears as she watched her only daughter marry for love, just as she had. The grandchildren continued to multiply, and James and Catherine found themselves presiding over a growing clan of energetic youngsters. They were patient grandparents, telling stories of the old days and teaching the children to ride and care for the horses. The story of how Catherine and James met became family legend, repeated to each new generation as a reminder that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the greatest blessings. As they entered their 60s, both James and Catherine remained remarkably healthy and active, though they moved more slowly and took more time to rest. James's hands, so strong and capable for so many years, began to show the effects of decades of hard work, developing arthritis that made cold mornings difficult. Catherine tended them with liniment and warm compresses, and James joked that he was lucky to have married a woman with nursing experience, even if her only patient had been herself at first. Catherine's eyesight began to fade, making the detailed bookwork more challenging, but Sarah had taken over most of the business management by then anyway. Catherine found she did not mind stepping back. She had worked hard all her life, and it was satisfying to see her daughter succeeding. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a grand party at the ranch, with family and friends coming from all over the territory. Daniel organized horse races and demonstrations. Sarah arranged a feast that featured dishes from every family recipe they had collected over the years, and Michael provided music, having taught himself guitar during his wandering years. As Catherine and James danced together under strings of lanterns hung between the barn and the house, surrounded by everyone they loved, Catherine felt overwhelmed with gratitude. 30 years of marriage, 3 children, 8 grandchildren and counting, a successful ranch, and most importantly, love that had only deepened with time. "Happy?" James asked, as he had so many times over the years. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Catherine replied honestly. "You. Every single day with you is a gift," James said. "Even the hard days, the days when the horses got sick or the money was tight or the kids were driving us crazy, every day with you was still the best day of my life." More years passed in the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. James and Catherine grew older. Their children matured into middle age, and grandchildren became teenagers and young adults. The ranch continued to thrive under the family's care, adapting to changing times while maintaining its core values of quality and integrity. On the 40th anniversary of the night James found Catherine beside the railroad tracks, they made the pilgrimage one more time to the memorial stone. They were both moving more slowly now, James using a walking stick and Catherine leaning on his free arm, but they made the journey together as they had so many times before. 40 years, Catherine marveled, settling carefully onto the blanket Daniel had spread for them earlier. It seems impossible. And yet here we are, James said, lowering himself beside her with a slight groan. Still together, still in love, still grateful for that terrible night that brought you into my life. They sat together as the sun set, holding hands and remembering. Not just that first night, but all the nights and days that had followed. The struggles and the triumphs, the laughter and the tears, the ordinary moments that had woven themselves into a life of extraordinary richness. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Nevada sky, James helped Catherine to her feet. They stood together, looking up at the same stars that had shone down on them 40 years before, and Catherine felt the circle complete. From broken and bleeding stranger to beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and partner, from a desperate rescue to a lifetime of love. Ready to go home? James asked softly. Always, Catherine replied. As long as home is wherever you are. They walked back to their horses slowly, taking their time, in no hurry to be anywhere but together. Behind them, the memorial stone gleamed pale in the starlight, marking not an ending but a beginning. The beginning of everything that mattered. And as they rode back toward the ranch, where lights burned warm in the windows and family waited, both James and Catherine knew with absolute certainty that every moment of their 40 years together had been worth it. Every challenge overcome, every joy celebrated, every ordinary day lived side by side. This was what love looked like. This was what a life well lived felt like, and they would not change a single moment of it. The ranch would continue. Their children and grandchildren would carry it forward, building their own lives and loves on the foundation James and Catherine had created. The story of the woman thrown from a train and the cowboy who saved her would be told to great-grandchildren and beyond, a reminder that love could bloom in the unlikeliest places, and that sometimes the worst night of your life could lead to all the best days that followed.